What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Pick Six Podcast, CBS Sports Daily NFL Podcast. I'm Will Brinson. I'm your host. It is Thursday, December 2nd, and this is the Insider Show with Josina Anderson. You can listen to us on the podcast feed, of course, and watch us on YouTube, youtube.com/Pick6, or search Pick Six Podcast in your YouTube feed. Subscribe and like if you're watching. Hit that little bell button to get alerts. And remember, we'll be live after every single primetime game. You never end. My wife can't figure out why. She's like, I don't understand. Are there games every Thursday and Friday, Monday? It's like, yes, we've been married for 10 years. You should know this by now. Please don't hear me through the office wall. Anywho, Josina, what's up? How are we doing?
I'm good. We got a very interesting game on tap this evening, with the Saints, who are still looking like they're going to be missing some players, and Cowboys, some players, and, getting over COVID, but getting D-Law back and, seeing what that looks like with Micah Parsons and all these other things. So it'll be interesting.
Oh, that's a good point too, because Parsons has been fantastic rushing off the edge. And yeah, I mean, I don't think that they have to worry about it right now because, he's in his rookie contract, but down the road, is he a linebacker? Is he an edge rusher? The costs are significantly different to franchise tag an edge rusher versus a linebacker. At any rate, DeMarcus Lawrence coming back is massive for the Cowboys, especially considering both Ryan Ramczyk and Teron Armstead are going to be missing. The Saints are also without Alvin Kamara, more than likely, and they're starting Taysom Hill. So Taysom Hill gets this new contract. Well, I mean, he gets this contract extension where it's like, it's basically funny money to try and salvage $8.5 million from the cap next year. Or they didn't want $8.5 million in dead cap space for next year. So to do that, they do this contract with Taysom Hill. But after they do the contract, which balloons if he becomes the starting quarterback for the next 4 years or something weird like that, he is the starting quarterback in this game. How do you think he's going to do? And what sort of ramifications are there down the road if he plays well and can hold on to this job?
So I talked to Cam Jordan this morning and just kind of asked him about his, thoughts as to how things were unfolding. And he said about Taysom Hill that, this is a guy who has started obviously for them last year, and he's hoping that they can have, a better turnout based on where they are. But obviously he's been in this position before. It was just interesting to kind of listen to his tone about the game, especially with the fact that they're on a 4-game losing streak and never having been on that since I think 2015 or what have you. So, he just said, we won games with Taysom, we won, without them, but that they're getting confidence from the fact that each of the 4 games that they lost, though the last one was obviously by, a fairly good margin.
At home on Thanksgiving.
yes, that they still felt like those games were winnable and that they still had the opportunity to come back. So it was just interesting to hear him say. And then obviously with the Alvin Kamara thing, I talked to a source this morning with regards to Mark Ingram, who was just saying, he was preparing to take the load if necessary. And, just when you look at when he first came to New Orleans in that first game against Tampa, he had 6 carries. And then in this last game, he's had 16. So he's already more than doubled, what he's been used to doing. So we know he can do it. So it's just interesting because the team is 5-6. They're on the outside of the NFC playoff picture, which is just very strange.
Weird.
Very strange. Then you're looking at the fact that Atlanta is above them, though they have the same record. And they're really going to have to scrap. And it's just not a position that they're, used to being in, but have to kind of deal with it. And to answer your question, as far as Taysom, I don't have any worries about how this will impact next year because I at least personally feel right now that the focus will still be on getting another quarterback through free agency next year.
So they're just, it's like, all right, the Trevor Siemian thing's not working. Let's go to Taysom. Sean Payton's had great success with backups, but it's like, let's go to Taysom and then we'll figure it out after this year. And Taysom will have a chance to win the job, but probably end up, losing out, assuming Sean Payton wants to get splashy in free agency, which would make a ton of sense.
If they can do it. But I think the interesting question, Will, is with the quarterback situation that they're in now, should this have been anticipated? You know what I'm saying? Like, if you ask people outside of New Orleans how they would have thought it would have worked with Trevor, they probably would have predicted that they would have been in this situation, right? And then with Taysom, he's shown the ability to play behind center. But then you look at the game against I think the Eagles last year. And then, he's shown where sometimes he's struggled as well when he has been the quarterback. So I think that it was an illustration, as there should be, because Sean Payton has the offensive prowess as a play caller and what have you, to believe in the system, to believe in his coaching. And then but I also think that sometimes, particularly in Trevor's case, that sometimes they are what they are. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I know exactly what you're saying. I mean, you can get excited about a quarterback all you want and believe in yourself as a head coach, but you can only turn chicken scratch into so much chicken salad, right? Or like, I mean, the phrase can be a little explicit, but you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Right, exactly. So, they have a situation on their hands, and I think you're right. Like, I haven't seen the specifics of the contract, but it's like Taysom Hill has to be the quarterback for like an extended period of time.
And clearly Mickey Loomis is going to be watching that, so exactly. It's there. The threshold is there. Obviously, it also helps to give him some confidence in the massaging back, particularly after Taysom did not win out versus Jameis, and he was a good sport about that. And, now they're having to kind of come back to him in this situation, which is why you always, as a coach and just a leader, keeping everything warm and people engaged and making them feel appreciated, which is something that you do as a leader at any job. Even look at Carolina, how they had to circle back to, Cam, although we have to talk about your Panthers. Yeah, because I don't know what is going on there, but 0-2
last week,
lost CMC. I mean, a lot changed, Will, since I think talked before turkey and macaroni and cheese.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
A lot changed.
We go in. It's like pre-stuffing, after stuffing. The Panthers were like surging for the playoffs, and Cam was Superman before stuffing. After stuffing, the Panthers stink.
You still have them dabbing in the back.
I know. They need to. Knock that off. I gotta get rid of these. The Cam thing, I sort of wonder, do you believe that what does Cam's performance, and it's the worst quarterback rating of any quarterback of the year, like 5.3 or 5.8 or something.
Career, the 5.8
of his career, was the worst of any quarterback in the NFL this year. Yeah, certainly the worst of his career. I don't put him as much on the loss on Cam as a lot of people might want to. That offensive line is just terrible. Like, it's a disaster. And I sort of think that this might force, like, assuming Matt Rule stays, which I think he will. I mean, there's some sense that he would be interested in a college job, but not right now. I think he wants to see what happens this offseason and try to get through, 4 full years.
There's only so many quarterbacks to pluck off the tree. I mean, because even if you were to draft quarterback, they need to get it together next season. There's no another 3-13, 4-12. You have to get it together. And then of the free agents that potentially could be out there, or whether there's a trade or whatever, you're talking about A-Rod, you're talking about Russ, who is trying to go to Carolina? You've already gone.
Aaron Rodgers is not asking, if Carolina's on a no trade list for Aaron Rodgers, I feel like.
That's what I'm saying.
I think might approve it, but even then, I don't know how many games the Panthers win with Deshaun Watson behind that offensive line.
And therein lies the other issue. So sometimes the ghost of past drafts starting to still haunt them with regards to personnel decisions. And really, if you look at Cam's history, even when Ron Rivera was there, and the talent that they did and did not have around him when it comes to the same thing again, whether it's wide receivers or whatever. At least Robbie Anderson, when I talked to him a couple of weeks ago, was just so excited to make the transition from Sam Darnold and being way off of his pace from a career year last year with Cam, and still trying to wait to get it on. But it just goes to show you how hard it is, Will, and this is another kind of philosophical thing, but I was just thinking about this the other day, how, you kind of ride the wave of accomplishments and then you have adversity, but really the accomplishment is just sustained consistency. And how just in any job, week in and week out, that is just so hard to maintain the same level. I mean, you're talking about Cam 5.8 last week. The week before that, everyone was, somewhat, hailing him. And before that, when he first came back. And then look at Baker Mayfield in the first game after OBJ was best passer rating. And then after that, it was worst passer. I mean, it's just it's just so herky jerky. You can't stay up for like 5 days.
It's a week to week proposition in the NFL. And you're right. Like the people who are the best in the NFL are the ones who don't get too high, don't get too low, remain consistent. And really the best at any job, you don't want peaks and valleys in the NFL. You want steady, consistent performance. And the Panthers don't have a roster built to be steady right now, especially with Christian McCaffrey out. We'll see what happens with him in the future. I think he has at least one more year with the Panthers, but maybe not anything after that.
But you know what, Will, too, real quick before you train, but it's also just emotional steadiness, right? And like how you talk about like the combine will come up this year in Indy, and you got to have the quantifiables with, the 40 and how they do all these drills. But then it's like, how does a player like Tom Brady or whatever, slip, to whatever. Right. And it's the things that you cannot read, the intangibles and the drive and the emotional steadiness through highs and lows and managing personal lives off the field as well.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, exactly. It is impossible to decipher science. And that's why everybody sucks at the draft, because you don't know, you can't read minds. Right. And there's only so much you can find out about a person. All right, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll talk about the future of Baker Mayfield in Cleveland and maybe the future of old Russ Wilson in Seattle. So Baker Mayfield, what Andrew Berry said, I don't know if this is much about showing me anything. Really, our focus is on winning games and playing at a high enough level that allows us to be in a strong spot in December. That is really where the focus is. I think Baker has shown a lot over the past 3+ seasons. So I do not necessarily subscribe to the notion that there's something in these next 5 games that is of particular focus, so to speak. Clearly asked about Baker Mayfield's contract status. I thought Baker did the smart thing. It turns out it was not smart, but I thought Baker did the smart thing this past offseason. He laid low. Didn't make a stink about his contract. He wasn't going to get $40 million from the Browns this past offseason. And imagine if he had, and they were having this season that they're having right now, and he was playing like he is, and he's banged up like he is. People in Cleveland would be losing their minds that they'd already paid him. So now, instead of losing their minds because they already paid him, everyone's losing their minds about whether or not they should pay him. Do you have a sense, Josina, of whether or not the Browns will actually pay Baker Mayfield this offseason? Do they kick it down the curve? Do they kick it down the road one more year? How do they, this is his 3rd year, right? So this is his 4th year. Is this his fourth year?
Fourth. Mm-hmm.
Yes. I mean, they've already picked up his 5th year option. So that's fully guaranteed. So, I mean, they've got him for, he's there for a 5th year. Mm-hmm. How do they handle Baker in the contract this offseason? Because it's hard to imagine them giving him a top tier quarterback. I mean, they just can't do it right now. Cleveland would riot. They would burn the city and the facility down.
Well, as you were talking, I feel like I was hearing Fred Smoot's voice in my head, because he's always talking about, you got a girlfriend, but you got to think about what girl can you get if you get rid of this girl. Like, he's always saying that, you know what I'm saying? And it's just like, you have Baker, but you always have to consider what is the option after, if you don't do it. Right. But you're also trying to assess what he's worth. And then, yes, if you keep him, if it's at a price that's lower, and you remember even with this, the Cowboys went through this with Dak Prescott and whether he was going to be paid in the Carson range. And then he did, kind of wait his time and then was able to get more. And then even if you don't want to pay Baker a certain amount above 33, 34, for whatever it is, Baker can be like, oh, really? So, what are you doing if I'm not here? And that's a real question for Andrew Berry. You went over the quote that he was just saying when he was asked about Baker Mayfield. What popped into my head is, good, Andrew Berry is saying what he has to say, because that's what he has to say. Now, kind of take you back behind the scenes, with the Browns. After the game that they just played, I thought it was very interesting because, I always kind of go to a few of these sources who kind of give me the pulse on the inside. And It was very interesting that I heard them say, like, everyone was talking about Baker Mayfield. And it was like, this game, they wouldn't have actually put on Baker. They thought that Baker did what he needed to do to win the game, and that a lot of the film showed a number of miscues and misreads by the running backs, actually. So that was, I thought, was very interesting. And also just some of the key drops that they had on certain plays in that game. But every other time that I've talked to these people, it has been Baker. And some of the times where I've heard behind the scenes that they've pointed out his misreads or pointed out, certain mistakes, and it's gotten hot behind the scenes sometimes, just, when you're kind of pointing things out on the film, whatever. I'm not talking about it in a breaking news way, so I don't want anyone to take it out.
But I mean, like, when you're breaking down, when you're breaking down film,
yes,
it's not like, okay, yes sir, no sir. It's like you're arguing about what the read was and what the move was.
Sometimes the conversation, and so I remember even in those conversations, someone saying, well, obviously the focus is not going to be on his extension at this point and what have you. And certainly in the various conversations I've had, I haven't gotten the sense that it's, a lock, and nor at some top tier level, clearly based on his performance. So Baker has a lot to prove. It's just a tough space for him to be in with the injuries. But lo and behold, well, this is the NFL. You have to be able to perform even when you're not at your best. And if you're out there, you're expected to do it. And I thought it was very interesting that Andrew said he's good enough to be out there to play. And, he needs to, and it can't, because listen, these are outside of, I think, one additional injury that I think he might have picked up, if I can recall correctly, during the Bengals game. These are the ailments that he had when they, played well against the Bengals right after OBJ lost. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And then the next week, and yes, I think he did suffer something in that game that made, in the game that he played after that, where the passer rating was much lower or what have you. But still, he's been banged up, and you have to play through it,
Yep. I mean, you want to get paid, you got to be on the field. And I think that's part of why he doesn't want to come off the field, because he doesn't want to lose the opportunity to get paid. But we'll see what happens to that. I find the Russell Wilson situation far more interesting because Josina, I mean, look, I don't know. I mean, I was asked on Seattle radio, I do Seattle radio every week. And I was asked on Wednesday, he said, all right, first question out of the gate, is Russell Wilson on the Seahawks next year? And I just don't see how he is. I mean, because there's one of two things. One, it becomes a Russ versus Pete thing. Like Russ goes and says, it's either him or me. Like, I can't live with this offense. I can't live with this setup anymore. And I think he probably loses that battle. I realize that would be kind of crazy, but I still think he probably gets traded in that situation if he does lose that, if he loses that battle. And then two is like, does Russ really want to be there for a rebuild anyway? Like, does he, even if you get a new coach and a new GM, if that's what you desperately want, there's not a lot around you. Like, Seattle isn't loaded with talent, and they don't have a ton of draft picks to make up for it. So I mean, I'll ask you the same question. Do you think Russell Wilson is in Seattle next year?
I think there's a possibility, definitely, that he's not. When I was watching the last game that they were playing against the Washington football team, it was very interesting. I think, and even as I was listening to you, what just came to my mind is how, even as accomplished as you are, even as many reps as you've had, even as experienced as you are, just how fleeting confidence is. Because when I was watching him play, he just didn't seem to have the same, he wasn't in his bag. It wasn't the same Russell skin. And that happens, it doesn't take long for you to be away from what you do, for doubt to kind of creep in. And then you're dealing with the injuries and the situation. I heard the commentators, pontificating on whether, they felt like his finger was completely back and how that was impacting the throws and things like that. And if you're watching that last game against Washington, and let's say you are Carolina, you're New Orleans, or whoever one of these teams that, maybe potentially trying to woo another free agent quarterback, that game is not inspiring you. So I feel like Russell needs to, in addition to whatever he's trying to do, I still think he needs to put some games back on film, even with everything that he does that inspires a little bit more. Does Russell still have that Russell magic, and not just kind of leaning on late game heroics and running around and scrambling or what have you, but that he can still slice and dice in the pocket a defense and lead them to a victory beyond what we're seeing transpire with the Seahawks kind of falling off this season.
The Seahawks also added Adrian Peterson, by the way.
Yes, they did.
Which I mean is great in the sense that he does exactly what Seattle wants to do, which is run the ball straight at the middle very aggressively. But I don't does adding Adrian Peterson move the needle for Russell Wilson? I mean, I just cannot see I just can't see Russell thinking Russell is so loyal that I think he would be. I don't think he would want to be the one to just leave the place that he's been in. But it happened in college. Like he got kicked to the curb by Tom O'Brien, essentially.
Well, and there's so many more considerations for Russell as a family man and a father, and all the things that they're trying to accomplish as players off the field. I mean, I was just talking to Leonard Fournette the other day, and he's I think it's called FanCoin or whatever, that all the cryptocurrency and all these the documentaries and all these things that these players are doing. There's so many things that they're also considering in addition to that. So yes, I do think that he very much can be loyal to the players, but I just think that his life concerns have evolved so much since he first came into the league that I think I would say it's a lot easier for him to detach than maybe you would think, or saying here right now. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. I mean, he cares a lot about his legacy. He wants to be known as one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. And he has to be thinking at this point that it's just not happening in Seattle. So we may have a very spicy offseason when it comes to Russell Wilson.
And here's the other thing I would ask you is whether you feel like, based on the way he was just playing against Washington and, trying to kind of show everybody that the finger is okay, but is it, would they have been better served staying with Gino while Russell was still continuing to heal that finger? But it's hard for them to sit back and, watch someone else. I remember when Jarvis was injured earlier for the season for the Browns, and, in those 3 or 4 games that he was away, saying how hard it was for him, it made him appreciate it all over again. So as many times as they go through it, it's kind of interesting to see them kind of re-experience that. And I think Russell was going through, I mean, he released that video, to kind of show that he was coming back, so you can see how they crave that attention and they miss it. But the question is, are you ready? Are you ready to cut? And I was just having this conversation with even Tron Davenport, who covers the Titans for ESPN. We were talking about Bud Dupree and how he had gotten hurt the previous season for the Steelers when they were on that incredible run. I think they had won their first 11 games. Then he gets hurt. Their season goes, completely whatever. The Titans pick him up, and then, they start playing him. But when you look at when, and I'm going to connect this back to Russell, but when you look at when Bud, got hurt, it kind of was like, I was like, but why? Obviously, to me, it was like he wouldn't be completely ready based on when he got hurt and maybe needed more time. And it's kind of the same thing. It's like, yeah, you're eager to get this piece out and da-da-da-da. And the same with the Seahawks, you're eager, and Russell is eager, but that's why you need the people around, to make that proper, assessment as to whether it's really there. And you're hoping that the player likewise is as forthcoming with what pain or whatever, not pain they're feeling at the time,
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And it always felt like Russell was just going to rush back because Russell, he likes the fake huddles, the fake teammates, all that stuff. At any rate,
yes.
Speaking of teammates, we got teammates. We got to talk to teammates on HQ. But Josina Anderson, always a pleasure.
Yes,
killing it as usual. We will talk to you next week.
Yes, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
All right, sounds good.
All right, bye.